All right, everybody, let's take a look at this. I think a story that's going to get a lot of attention. The Federal Auditor General's Office recently fired some of its employees after finding out they were earning side money from undisclosed government contracts. The police have been called in to investigate the employees who were breaking the code of conduct and most likely the law. Firings took place between September and December of last year. And of course, it comes on the heels of so many other stories about questionable behavior on government contracting, right? Of course, we're still talking about the millions of dollars spent on the ArriveCan app. Let's find out more about this story involving the Auditor General's office with Christopher Nardi. He's parliamentary reporter at the National Post, and he broke this story. Hi, Christopher. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
So you know, in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute. The Auditor General, these are the people that are supposed to keep everyone in check. And if the people keeping everyone in check aren't keeping themselves in check, oh, man, we're a lost cause. Am I off base here?
Well, it goes to show largely about how complicated it is for the public service using its, attestation system where basically it's up to employees to attest that they don't have a second job and up to government contractors to attest that they're not in a conflict of interest. It goes to show the limits of that system that as it stands, right? So there's this situation that kind of illustrates that even, one of the biggest government watchdogs isn't immune to employees not declaring that they're also doing work on the side with the government that they're auditing. And the Auditor General, as I discovered in this story, only found out because another department flagged these two or three employees to them. It was the procurement department while it was doing some reviews of these people or of companies that worked for the government, went to the Auditor General's office and by June of last year said, hey, this one employee claims they're a contractor for us and we're reviewing their status and they say that they work for you. Do they still work for you? And the Auditor General's office was like, oh, shoot, we didn't know that. And then promptly basically fired this individual. And then another one was a former, another government employee. And when they asked them to transfer over their security, what we call their security clearance, the Auditor General's office, they found out it was suspended because they were investigated because of side work that they had declared with the government. So if the Auditor General's office is getting caught, there's a fair amount of experts I've spoken to who said, well, maybe it's time to change the system, right? Uh-huh. Maybe the attestation system that we have now, which is based on the goodwill of people, there might be some holes and we need to fix those.
So is there a silver lining here in the sense that, well, they did catch these people? Like there's clearly some sort of check and balance here that is catching, these instances?
I mean, I'm happy that they did, but the problem is, and I think this has been highlighted a lot through the study on ArriveCan and that story that many of your listeners may have heard about, the gentleman who ran a company that got $8 million in contracts to ArriveCan, who also is a public servant at the Department of National Defense, who's also now been suspended. What we're finding out through these stories is how little is that we don't know what we don't know. Right? The government doesn't know how many of its employees aren't declaring this basically illegal side business or this unethical side business that they have with the government because they're not telling them. But, so they can't gauge how widespread of a problem this is. And I think what made my story about the Auditor General's office catch on is because of the irony of it all, right? As you pointed out, it's the Auditor General's office, if I'm going to use excellent English, got by the same issue. And so that's why, there are people who are saying maybe it's time now that the government takes more of a proactive approach. Maybe set up audit teams or check teams in every department, and their only job is to pick a random number of public servants and go in and kind of quote unquote audit their declaration, their attestations, audit their expense reports, just kind of instill this concern or this fear that I could be audited, so I better be honest, because if I won't, well, I could likely be fired, and I could even have my file transferred to the police for criminal investigation.
We're with Christopher Nardi from the National Post. Christopher, this also reminds me the story, I think it was dozens, of CRA, Canada Revenue Agency employees that got fired, right, because they tried to get CERB payments, right? They were collecting CERB while working for the CRA, and why it makes me think of that is these are people that they said to themselves, there's no way they're going to catch us, right? They worked for the CRA, so they're like, there will be no oversight. They're never going to catch us. And in my mind, in this case with the Auditor General employees, they're probably it was the same mindset. Oh, we can do this. They'll never catch us. Is that what's going on here? Are there so many people in government that say they'll never catch us?
Well, you know what? It might be. It's hard to tell because I haven't spoken to them, but at first glance, that really is what it appears to be. Right? The last on the CRA file, I think the last update that I got was that they fired 120 people and were investigating 600 employees in total.
Wow.
For having claimed to serve as an employee. And these people had to be really remarkably either unimpressed by their own employer or remarkably, didn't think about this at all, because it's so easy. When you submitted for CERB, you had to put in your social insurance number. And what's one piece of information that your employer absolutely has on you? It's your social insurance number, right? Yeah. Like, it's such an easy check for CRA to literally just match who applied for CERB with a list of their, I think they have 60,000 employees, 60,000 social insurance numbers, and cross-check. So I think, yes, you're absolutely right. There's a fair amount of these people who just think they can get away with it because who's going to check this anyways? But they also don't think that there's all sorts of things that can obviously make them kind of fall into the net, or if their employer decides to be a bit more proactive about it. But you do get the sense that there's kind of a lack of fear amongst a lot of these cases of the people aren't afraid of getting caught. They don't think they will. So if you start putting in even if it's small, more proactive measures, the government can never go check every single one of its almost 400,000 public servants and check every single one to see if they have a contract with the government. It's totally unfeasible, right? But if you think you might be audited, if you think that you might have your expense reports checked, then you might actually think twice about trying to screw the system, right?
Yeah, let me ask you this, Christopher, because clearly the federal government, the Liberal government, they're on the ropes, right? The polls don't look good. They can't afford more scandals, right? Is there any indication that cabinet ministers and the Prime Minister are taking stories like this seriously so they don't keep repeating?
Well, we heard Prime Minister Justin Trudeau yesterday. He was asked about my story on the Auditor General and just the sequence of ArriveCan, procurement controversies that have popped up. He says he takes it very seriously. He says the government is reviewing. He wants the government to rethink how it does procurement, how it does contracting, to make sure that this stops happening, that they improve the system. But unfortunately, yesterday, when I asked for details about how they're rethinking this and what they're reconsidering and how they're redrawing, I mostly got blank stares from staffers, and they just kind of reiterated things that they've done in the past to address the issue. So, the Prime Minister claims that he takes this very seriously, that he's looking at this, and that he wants things to change. But until we actually see what those changes are and we see them in action, I'll see it when I believe it. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, Christopher, same here. I want to thank you so much for coming on our show, speaking to our listeners. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Christopher Nardi, go check out his piece. National Post website is where you'll find it, on the Auditor General's office and those bad employees.